This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here in my kitchen with Chef Brad Long from Belong up at the Brickworks. How are you today, sir?
Not too bad, thanks, Jamie.
Now, we are here today to speak about honing and sharpening knives. And the reason I wanted to bring you into my kitchen to speak about this is because you had some quite strong opinions on these subjects.
Well, yeah. I mean, these are the tools of my trade, and if you're not using your tools properly, you're kind of bringing us all down. Let's put it that way.
Right.
The next thing is, and this is the easiest part, is it sharp? Is pointy,
Right.
sharp, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you use a thing like this. This has two sides. There's a number on the side of it that gives you a grit. So there's this one says it's a.
Show the camera that.
Yeah, see if you can see that. There's one that says 1,000. There's one that says 3,000. The higher number basically means that in whatever area they're counting, there's 3,000 little raised bits as opposed to 1,000. That makes that the coarse side, and that's the fine side. This is more of a grit that shreds metal off, rips metal off. It's not fine enough, and it's not an even enough surface to really pull deep layers of metal off. It just kind of rips dangling pieces off. And
I see. Right. Okay. So show us how this process comes together. Show us the steps that you would take with, shall we say, this Wüsthof chef's knife here.
So starting with the lowest number, we're going to start putting an edge on. And this thing has to be on a surface that doesn't move, which this is perfect, because any movement is going to change the angle. It's going to change what I'm doing. It's going to screw me up. It has to be stable. You can see that this is basically the angle at which the blade is now sharpened, and it has to be equal on the other side, like this, in order to bring it to a point. So flat and up, and that's what gives you that blade along the edge. And there's several variations of what's the perfect angle that you want your blade. That again depends on your hand, what you do. The process of doing this is all about being consistent. You have to pull the blade across at that exact angle for the entire length of the blade every time you do it. And every pull has to be answered by an equal force on the other side. So you're constantly pulling that perfect angle across and across and across and across, and I'll do it now once for real. Make sure you start with the one end of the blade on there and finish with the other. Otherwise, that's how you get those uneven spots. It's not a big press down. I'm not trying to peel big chunks of steel off this thing. It's actually letting the stone and the grit do its work and letting the natural elements of what this thing is made out of work, together in the process. And so, I don't know if you hear that sound. You can hear that obviously there's something happening, because you can hear the grittiness, and you can hear the ring of the steel coming off it as well. And I would be doing this for quite some time. Like, each knife, to get to its blade by me would take quite a bit of time. I mean,
How many passes would you say?
It could be hundreds.
Really?
And then once I have that, then it could just be dozens or even a couple to bring it back. So it's a longer process. Essentially, you would do the setup, and then you have your knife brought to the angle and the edge that you want. You would bring this over. Now you have the edge, the angle set that you want. Then you would bring that angle set up to a fine point, and you're ready to go. And I would think, depending on how much your knife is used and actually how much you wear out a knife and all those things, after you get the edge properly set, you don't need to knead this nearly as much. So home person gets that knife set, and then even if you did this once a week, just pulled it across. Just pull it across a few times a week. you'll find then it'll be ready to go when you pick it up. It'll be steel a few times. And then professional end of the scale is that you would get your knives set up like this, you would bring them to sharpness, you'd put them away, you'd get up the next day, you'd start working, you'd steel it. At the end of the day, depending on how heavy the day was, you might not need to do that again. You might be able to bring it right back to a good edge, just with the finest. It should be sharp. It should also still, just before you use it, probably just need to be tidied up. And so you basically, once, maybe twice, you take a piece of paper and basically, ideally, by its own weight, it would just fall through the, through the paper.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be that sharp. But I mean, honestly, you know, through the day, as long as you can take a piece of paper and just, it catches it and you can cut it away, you know that it's sharp. Because, when you think about this, the more it is dull, when you go to cut something, the more you have to press to get it through. And I'm talking about squishy stuff like tomatoes and peppers, things you're going to cut all day long. You pick up a tomato, and you know, you're just going to cut something. And you pick up some knife, you're someplace, and you go to cut the tomato, and the knife doesn't go through the skin of the tomato, it sits on it. And knife, I usually try this little corner right here. I find that that's the sharpest knife point, usually, because everyone else who's been picking this knife up, all the people who are using it are probably using this part of it. And so, even if you nick the skin of something, you can then get the blade in, and it'll go through. The mistake would be, dull knife, push really hard, one of two things happens. It's dull, you push really hard, and you squish and tear and make a mess of what you're cutting, or, way worse than that, you're pushing on it and it slips and it goes into you. That's pretty much, I'm trying to think, that's got to be at least 3/4 of the way I've ever cut myself. It's sloppy. You're tired, you're lazy, your knives are dull, you've got to get something done, somebody's yelling at it, there's pressure, and you go to do something and you pick it up and it slips and you cram it into your hand. It's not typical for a trained chef to nick themselves with a sharp knife. My mother always used to say, watch that knife sharp. And I'd say, no, that's sharp, it's going to be safer. You think about it, if that sharp knife touches something, it sticks there. Have you ever noticed when you have a really sharp knife, you put it on a piece of food or something you want to cut, it stays there because that blistering little fine edge sticks right into it and it won't move. It makes it safer. Believe me, sharp knives are way safer. And it's less energy. You exert less energy. It's a pleasure to use.
Would you mind showing me again how to use the steel? Because that's the one that I think I get the kind of delicacies of using the whetstone, but using the steel is what I don't understand. I've never actually used one of those myself.
So the way that I do it is this way. The way that we should be talking about it is at the same angle that you sharpen the knife, you will run that same thing down like this. So you're doing that. And then up underneath. So you're just basically hitting both sides of it and doing so safely by doing it away from you. And I've watched people, especially on the Food Network, where they stand there and go with the steel. So like the first 3 times you did it, you probably brought it up to a really good home, like a really sharp status. And then the next 15 times you did it, you probably just wasted the blade, right? Because you really are wearing away the blade as you do this. Yeah. So I always think, the other thing is that there's 2 things that happen in a kitchen about knives. You hear someone in a corner doing this, and they're smacking the knife against the board of something for some bizarre reason, or you hear this, and I'll do it, just you hear this, and you're like, hello. Either your knife is incredibly dull and you need to go and sharpen it, or you just wasted all the time you spent sharpening your knife. Because there's no way you need to hone a knife on steel more than a couple times. It's either not going to make it sharp, or you're wasting the sharp. So that's the biggest thing about this. That's that thing that Grandpa does at Thanksgiving when he drags out the really beautiful pearl-handled carving set for once a year, and he gets it out and he goes, and then you can't figure out why the damn turkey won't cut. And it's like, because you didn't sharpen the knife, you just steel the knife. You have to take care of the poor thing first. Because this is an adjuster. This is what matters to make your knife sharp.
So Brad Long, thank you very much for joining us here today at Good Food Revolution with all of these Wüsthof tools here. If there were a takeaway for the home chef when talking about honing, sharpening and the like, what would that takeaway be? I
think the most important thing would be buy a really good knife, not a set of knives. Just buy one really, really good knife, and then don't just buy one knife. Then you need to have a steel and a stone to sharpen it, and then you can maintain it. You know, you have a good knife, you start by setting the blade, you bring the blade up to sharpness, you maintain the blade, you're good to go. Knife, stone, steel, all you'll ever need. And then, really, after you have these two things and one of these babies, then you can start adding to your set.
And I guess the one last thing would be don't try to sharpen serrated knives.
And don't even bother sharpening a serrated knife. Look at, no, never mind. Don't sharpen it. Don't do it.
Brad Long, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye for now.